enabled. Cyril Amarchand Mangaldas presents CNBC TV18, The Thought League, Season 2.
Hello and welcome to the Thought League. Now today the spotlight is on the evolving founders' mindset globally and in India, especially with the emergence of new age companies. So what has really changed? To discuss this, we have thought leaders on this idea for change today. Let me welcome James Allen, the partner at Bain and Company, joining us straight from London, and Cyril Shroff, managing partner at Cyril Amarchand Mangaldas. Now, welcome to the show and CNBC TV18, gentlemen. And James, you've also authored books on this particular subject. How do you describe a founder's mindset, and is it distinct from the founder?
No, thanks very much for having me. And it doesn't have to be distinct, but let me just be clear. We wrote a book that we published in 2016 called Founder's Mentality.
Yes.
And we were very purposeful in saying that we wanted to talk about the mentality of companies that might have had a founder at their origin, may still have a founder, and why that gave distinct competitive advantage. And we talked about three things. One was that a sense of founder's mentality gave the company an insurgent mission. You know, every great company is at war against their industry on behalf of underserved customers. It let the founder be obsessed with the front line. Who makes the product and delivers it to customers? They should be the kings and queens of the organization. And also this idea of an owner mindset, that we want to have speed to action. And we said, what goes wrong with companies with strong founders mentality? And one of the things we said is founders, you know, that some founders aren't scalable, but others are. And so I think it's important to say you can have a great culture, but that is often embodied by a founder or the family of the founder, but sometimes the culture lives beyond the founder.
That's right. And this particular aspect is evolving very fast. Cyril Shroff, reflect on this. The growing thrust towards new age governance is also one important catalyst for the mindset also to evolve with the changing times.
This is actually a very topical and a kind of a brilliant discussion to have. But first, I would actually like to set the context because India and a few other cultures like India are different, and they're changing as well, partly because of what you call the new age companies, and also the speed of regulation that is coming in. Now, so why Indian context different? First, both from a regulatory and from a societal aspect. So in India and in similar cultures, which are more relationship oriented, there is a fusion between the identity of the founder / promoter and the corporate entity. So they also leave a very different kind of impact on the organization and on society. Now, in India, public markets and a lot of other cognate legislations have actually made this different. So in our rules for our public markets, the promoter, which is just probably another metaphor for founders, has been given specific regulatory status and other legislation as well. For example, Section 29A of the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, the IBC, where the promoter has a lot of implications once you are in that category. Then on the corporate side, maybe on a more positive note, I think we all know that the founder / promoter has an outsized impact on the company. And they're the real source of power. That's the center of power in founder-led companies or promoter-led companies, is that the founder is actually the source of power and not the board. So this interesting dichotomy of the corporate identity being fused with the real source of power being the founders / promoters creates a very interesting dynamic. And how that has played out in India is on the regulatory side. We basically have an approach of the buck stops here. When things go wrong in public markets, who do you call?
Yes.
And whatever may be the legal position.
That's right.
This is the kind of cocktail of factors that make founders and promoters very different.
That's right, Cyril Shroff. And in fact, some flexibility now is emerging from the regulator side in, not asking for a promoter and change of that concept rule. But James, is this particular concept unique only to India? India is a developing country, and the vision as well as dynamism of one person is something because of which the whole promoter concept also came in. Is it unique to India? How are we seeing this globally?
The question about how do you have companies with a great founder mentality or a promoter mentality where there's an individual or a set of individuals who feel full accountability for the future of the company, and it's not run by dispassionate committees, it's run by passionate people. How do you have that on one hand and some form of governance and control if that person or collection of person begins to underperform? I think the overall ownership of the company, meaning greater than 50%, has to have a sense of founder mentality. You know, if you talk to the private equity industry, they don't give the CEOs 51% because they would argue the combination of the private equity owner and the management team with anywhere between 3 and 20%, that combination asserts enough control to have change agents in the company and bring it forward. So that's issue one. How do you do that balance? Issue two, which is not unique to India, but is different culturally, is the degree to which founder mentality extends to families and family control. So if you look at Silicon Valley and the Palo Alto view of founders, you don't have baby Gateses or baby Zuckerbergs going around. There's no discussion that founder mentality extends to the family. But if you go to a lot of countries in Latin America, a lot of countries in Southeast Asia, India, it is incredibly important to what they feel is a distinct view of that company. And part of it is because the reputation of those families and their ability to get things done within a complex society of banks and governments, and the need to assert will, the ability to think multi-generational in a world so turbulent, that is its own special sauce that bring these companies forward. And the track record of these companies says there's something there. And how you balance that with institutional control is exactly what India is going through. So,
James, you brought about a very interesting point. It's not just the founder, but the founder's family and their involvement and the company going from one generation to another. Is that changing in the new age companies, Cyril Shroff, in India?
Absolutely. And there's a recent consultation paper that was put out by SEBI in May 2021 as well, where it actually relies upon certain facts, and which is that in 2009, they took an average of listed companies in corporate India. The average promoter holding was about 58%. And even in 2018, it had fallen to about 50%. And if you were to take that same survey now, I think the average has fallen below 50. And conversely, the institutional shareholding has gone up from 25 to 34 in the same period, and it is probably in the 40s now. And this is having profound implications as well, especially for the kind of new age of the unicorns that are being listed as we speak. There is very high institutional shareholding, and relatively, with barring a few exceptions, relatively low, founder shareholding. So it's more Silicon Valley-ish, to use the example that Jimmy gave. And that, I think, is having a lot of deeper psychological and cultural implications, and one of which is going to be, and I hope we discuss it, is a sharp debate on whether founders and promoters are a permanent concept. So the notion of once a promoter / once a founder, always a founder, does that hold good true anymore? And how do we think of these companies after the original founders have either diluted below a particular level or are no longer in control?
That's right. But Cyril Shroff, I have one question. It's not just about the stake and the controlling stake. Even in the new age companies, and a recent listing we saw is a professionally managed company, but a lot of the assurance is given by the founder himself, and a lot of the business is really dependent on the founder, and even the investors coming in, the large pool of them are really backing that particular founder. So is this concept something that we are going to see more often in the new age companies as well?
So, firstly, I think it's too new to comment upon because we are seeing this kind of new model is, not even a decade old properly in India. It's literally a couple of years. So, I think we'll need the benefit of time to judge how this works out. But if you look at the old age companies, they have been around for multiple decades, even centuries, some of them. So, we are not comparing apples with apples. But yes, there is a linkage between the level of stakeholding and the mindset that you bring in. And to use Jimmy's phrase, I mean, instead of the founders running with passion or founders mentality with the passion, or dispassionate committees are running the future. I mean, that we have to see how that works out over a long period of time. And when you move away from the concept of a founder slash promoter into a kind of a more antiseptic concept like persons in control, is it going to cause deeper psychological damage to the nature, to the concept of a founder's mentality? Now I'm using it more as a cultural term rather than as a legal term.
All right, so corporatization of the companies also we have seen in India and we have seen globally as well. We'll discuss more on how does the mindset change and is it evolving fast enough globally. Stay tuned to the Thought League.
Cyril Amarchand Mangaldas presents CNBC TV18, The Thought League, Season 2.
Welcome back. You are watching the Thought League and we are discussing the evolving founder mentality globally and in India. James, I want to understand, how has the shift from a founder, a visionary person who started the company, to a corporate culture really successfully conversion that has taken place globally? And how do you see this in the Indian context? Is that really taking shape?
First, beware of institutional investment. I mean, the U.S. public markets are largely broken. We have this mythology that by allowing the market to talk and letting shareholders talk, that somehow makes wise decisions, when we've actually seen that a lot of the investment in public markets are day traders, flash traders. They are not necessarily making great decisions for the company. So I think we have to not worship the market or the public equity market as being some perfect crowdsource of wisdom. We should look at the history of business on where this idea of professionalization came from. I mean, it is largely a direct reaction in the 1920s to aging founders. A lot of what we think about in modern business was really the late 1880s, a group of founder-led enterprises. Think Rockefeller, think JP Morgan, kind of willfully through the act of single people, and unfortunately at the time, single men, creating companies. And they held totalitarian control over these companies. And in the 1920s, a number of them, most notably Ford, was being run by an aging founder that I think we could argue wasn't doing the best for the company. And there was a guy named Alfred Sloan of GM who said, we've got to somehow take back control of these companies from the founder. And he started the science of professional managers. And the idea of a professional manager is they would be dispassionate custodians of the business. They would be fungible. It's a skill. It can work across functions in an enterprise, across markets, across geographies. And as we all know, professional managers are perfectly disposable. And that group was given a task. As your company grows, give to your customers the benefits of your growing size. But professional management always has one problem. The bigger you get, the more complex you get, and the slower you get. Growth creates complexity. Complexity kills growth. And we are seeing now the rise through technology of companies competing on the basis of scale and speed. We work on behalf of the insurgent mission, get our people in the front line as the heroes, have an owner mindset, and be very careful about undoing that in the desire to professionalize, because the alternative is bringing dispassionate managers in who may or may not operate with speed and passion and do the things necessary in a more turbulent world. And so I think we have to look very carefully. Our argument would be, yes, you need to balance institutional control with founder mentality, but don't go overboard. Don't repeat the lessons of a lot of the Western companies that have become terribly struggling bureaucracies and incumbents unable to adapt to a more turbulent world.
That's right, James. But here in Indian context, there is a very important point, Cyril Shroff. Can't we have more visionary leaders as CEOs, the professional managers who are really guided by a robust board with many investors also having a board seat? And is there a lacuna when it comes to that kind of a talent?
So that's a great question, and I think it goes back to something that I said in the initial comments as well. As where is the real, where is the engine room of entrepreneurship, and where is the engine room of progress? So in a clearly identified, unabashed founder-led organization, it is the founder. But when you're migrating to this so-called board-controlled enterprise, whatever that means, that source is unclear. And when you put it in the Indian context, we know that the maturity of Indian boards in terms of how you want to think about it, or whether they can actually drive the corporate agenda and control and guide and support the CEO in an ideal world. I mean, there is a very big difference between the theory and the reality. Firstly, our boards are not truly independent. Secondly, they're extremely risk averse. Third, I think there is a fear of that there is anything can happen from a risk point of view in the sort of Indian context, and the rule of law is not strongly established enough by which true board governance is possible. So the risk that we run is that if we move too fast away from the founder concept to the board control concept, that we actually may not be able to traverse that whole that leap across the valley, and we'll fall somewhere in between.
Yes.
So we have to be extremely careful in terms of substituting one model for the other, because the risk is you may be on neither side, and you may land up in falling in between two stools of either model, and then making a big mess.
That's right. And in fact, the moot point over here, James, and I would like to attract your attention here, is that when there is a combination of founder being also the manager, the CEO of the company. Tell us about the dominant role of the board, and do you think that particular role of the board is evolving fast along with the founder mindset, and is also changing the mindset of the founder in that process?
So I think, I don't think it's by accident that, we have arrived at a model where you want an incredibly strong, empowered leadership team and some form of board or governance oversight. I think that model is a good one. Our experience when we are working with founders is that the best boards are helping them scale and institutionalize the sense of founder's mentality. The issue you always have with a single founder is the more successful they are, the harder it is to scale that mentality, because you need to scale it through people, through processes in the right way, not the wrong way. And a good board can help think through that issue of scaling and institutionalizing this culture beyond any one individual. That is a right and responsible thing to do. The bad boards will attempt, and you hear the language all the time, to bring in adult supervision, bring in corporate bureaucrats who in effect try to scale but undermine everything the founder was trying to accomplish. And so you can see some boards doing exactly the right thing to support the initial founding team to scale and to start to put in processes to be able to codify what they do. And you see some boards doing a horrible job in that, as often the board members come from other large incumbent firms that have never been run by founders, and they want to turn it into a bureaucracy. And so I think, it's not that the idea of a strong management team with the founder mentality and a board that's somehow inherently bad. I think it's a very good balance on behalf of stakeholders. It's whether you have a good team and you have a good board, and very often you don't.
Right. And but I would like to also highlight that it's not just the board. that could still be notionally in the control of the founder. But on the other hand, Cyril Shroff, there are many stakeholders, especially in the publicly listed companies. We have seen the emergence of proxy advisory firms. We have seen investors, activist investors as well. And on the other hand, there are many other stakeholders who value the company as per the corporate governance standards. How is that evolving in India?
So it's work in progress. I think all these topics, whether it is a maturity of board governance, whether it is public accountability through looking at it from an ESG lens and a stakeholder governance point of view, or whether it's the legal system. I think firstly, India and the West are chalk and cheese. I think they're not comparable because our culture and our system and our legal processes are very different. They might be moving broadly in the same direction, but there is a lot of important distinctions. But it's a good thing is that there is an increasing awareness that the joint stock corporation and listed companies are not merely running for the benefit of one set of stakeholders, namely the shareholders, but for a much broader set of stakeholders, which includes the community and the environment and the workers and all of that. So that, I think, is becoming mainstream in sort of Indian corporate thinking, and most leading enterprises, quite often promoter-led, have imbibed this even more so than the so-called non-promoter-led / professionally managed companies. But I think we have a distance to go. And I think at the end of it, also, the legal system and how people are held accountable will have a big role to play in how this kind of works out. It's a very complex subject with many moving parts. But the right outcome is what James said in terms of, a founder's mentality, whether embedded in a founder or a set of managers who have the founder's mentality, and a good board which provides that support and oversight without converting it into bureaucracy. That's where you need to land up. But it's a very dodgy journey from here.
That's right. The understanding has to be there, James, Cyril Shroff, that the organization goes much beyond one particular, founder, and even if it is the person who really created that particular company. So that is the purpose of the corporation, for value creation for the different stakeholders in that particular company. And that mindset is evolving fast with the modern day corporate governance standards. Thank you so much, Cyril Shroff, as well as James Allen, for joining us on this edition of the Thought League. Thanks so much.
Cyril Amarchand Mangaldas presents CNBC TV18, The Thought League, Season 2.
Focus, ideate, innovate, enable.